My name is Isabella. I'm 28 years old. And the story I'm about to share feels like it belongs in a thriller, but it's my reality. It's about a house that was legally mine, and yet my stepmother sold it behind my back. What happened after she found out what I did in return is something she never expected. And it changed everything between us. The house was an old Victorian on Cedar Avenue, tall windows, creaky floors, and a garden overgrown with wild roses. It wasn't perfect, but it held memories that shaped who I am. When my father remarried after my mother died, I was 15 and skeptical of Elaine, my stepmother. She was sharp and cold in ways I couldn't understand then, and I was sure she didn't. Like me, when my father suddenly passed away from a stroke, I inherited the house, my sanctuary, my past. But Elaine had other plans. She convinced my grieving father, or so she said, to update the will. Only I never saw those changes until after his death. The house was put on the market and within weeks sold, without telling me. Without my consent, I was devastated. The house was mine by law, by blood. But Elaine had used forged documents, signing my name to speed up the sale. When I confronted her, she smiled coldly and said, "It's done. You can't fight this." I didn't back down. Instead, I plunged into a war that I never imagined I'd fight, a battle for my own home. My family's legacy. I hired a lawyer, got every document examined, and found the proof I needed. Her forgery. The sale was illegal. But even with that, reclaiming the house wasn't guaranteed. Elaine had moved quickly, transferring the money and buying herself a new life with the profits. Instead of just going to court, I decided to take a risk. I would buy back the house at any cost. I contacted the new owners, who were investors planning to renovate and sell quickly. They were surprised by my offer. It was well above market value, driven not by money, but by my need to reclaim what was mine. Elaine's reaction when she heard about this was venomous. She called me reckless and foolish, but I was determined. I wasn't just fighting for a building. I was fighting for my dignity. Weeks of tense negotiations followed. Every phone call felt like a battlefield. Elaine tried everything to stop me. Legal threats, emotional manipulation, even reaching out to the investors herself. But I had made my peace with the fight. Eventually, I closed the deal. The house was mine again. When Elaine found out, she was shattered. She called me late one night, voice trembling. "Why would you do this? You didn't need to pay so much." I told her calmly, "Because this house is more than money. It's my past, my memories, and I won't let you erase that." That night, the lines between us changed forever. What she felt then, regret, anger, maybe even fear, was the beginning of a reckoning that neither of us expected. Elaine's voice still echoed in my mind that night, fragile and desperate, a stark contrast to the cold woman who had sold my home without a second thought. I wanted to believe there was something human left in her, buried beneath that armor of greed and bitterness. But as the days passed, I realized that this was no longer just about a house or money. It was about reclaiming control over a part of my life she had tried to destroy. The house, now back in my possession, needed more than just legal battles. Years of neglect had taken their toll. The paint was chipped, windows were cracked, and the garden was a wild mess. But when I stepped inside, I felt the weight of my childhood memories in every corner. The smell of old wood, the faint creak of the staircase, the light filtering through the dusty curtains. I started the repairs slowly, hiring contractors, and spending long nights researching how to bring the house back to life. Each hammer strike felt like a strike against Elaine's betrayal. Elaine, meanwhile, was nowhere to be seen. She avoided any direct confrontation, but her presence loomed. In subtle ways, rumors whispered in the neighborhood, mutual acquaintances taking her side, legal notices sent with veiled threats. She wanted me to feel isolated and defeated, but I refused. One afternoon, while sorting through some old boxes left behind in the attic, I found something unexpected, a stack of letters from my father written before he died. They were addressed to me, but never sent. Hidden away like secrets waiting to be uncovered, Dot reading those letters was like hearing his voice again. He spoke about his love for me, his regrets, and his hope that I'd always remember where it came from. But there was something else, a warning, a caution about Elaine. He wrote that he feared she might try to take everything from me, that she was not to be trusted. Those words stung, but they also fueled me. My father had known all along, yet he had been powerless to stop it. Now it was up to me. I started to gather evidence, conversations, old emails, anything that could expose Elaine's true intentions. I hired a private investigator to dig into her past. What I uncovered shocked me. Elaine had a history of manipulating and swindling others, always just a step ahead of the law. The house was just one of many targets. Armed with this knowledge, I took my fight beyond the house. I filed a lawsuit not only to reclaim the property, but also to protect my inheritance and expose Elaine's deceit. The legal battle was grueling. Elaine's lawyers were aggressive, trying to discredit me at every turn. But I stood firm, backed by facts and a resolve that surprised even me. Friends and family who once doubted me began to see the truth. One day, Elaine showed up at the house, unannounced. Her eyes were cold but tinged with something else, fear, regret. She said nothing at first, just looked around the place she had lost. "I didn't think you'd fight back like this," she finally said. I met her gaze steadily. "This isn't just about a house, Elaine. It's about justice." She left without another word, but I knew this wasn't over. The final showdown was coming, and I was ready. Asterisk, the courtroom was cold and sterile, but every time I stepped inside, I felt the weight of my purpose pressing down on me. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was a reckoning years in the making. Elaine sat across from me, her posture stiff, lips tight, eyes flashing with contempt. I was no longer the scared teenager who had lost her mother and felt powerless. I was a woman determined to take back what was rightfully hers. The trial dragged on for weeks. Elaine's lawyers tried everything, casting doubt on my claims, questioning my character, even digging into my personal life to find anything that could discredit me. But I was prepared. My lawyer was sharp, my evidence airtight. We exposed the forged signatures, the illegal sale, and Elaine's extensive history of deceit. During one particularly intense session, the private investigator I'd hired testified about Elaine's past scams, broken families, stolen inheritances, and ruined lives. The courtroom gasped when the extent of her manipulation became clear. Elaine's mask began to crack. I saw the anger and desperation flicker across her face as the truth came crashing down. But the biggest moment came when I presented my father's letters, his voice from beyond the grave, warning me of Elaine's true nature. The judge read them aloud, and I felt my father's presence in the room, as if he was finally protecting me. The verdict was in my favor. The sale was declared null and void. Elaine was ordered to pay damages and legally barred from any further claims on my inheritance. Left the courthouse exhausted but victorious. The house was mine, truly mine now, and so was my dignity. Back at the house, the atmosphere had changed. I could finally breathe again, surrounded by the memories and the future I was rebuilding. Elaine tried to disappear from my life after the trial, but a part of me knew she would never stop lurking in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to strike again. So I took steps to protect myself, changing locks, securing accounts, and surrounding myself with people I trusted. The experience left scars, but it also taught me something invaluable. Strength isn't just about fighting. It's about reclaiming yourself, no matter how broken you feel. Months later, I hosted a small gathering in the restored garden. Friends and family came together, celebrating not just the house, but resilience and new beginnings. As I looked around, I realized the house wasn't just a place, it was a symbol of survival, justice, and the fierce love that can turn pain into power. And no one, not even Elaine, could take that away from me again. After the courtroom victory, I thought the worst was behind me. But sometimes winning the battle is only the start of a longer war. Elaine's presence didn't vanish. It morphed into something darker and more insidious, a shadow that crept into my life when I least expected it. The house, once a sanctuary, became a fortress I had to defend. Every creak, every unexpected sound made me jump. The phone would ring at odd hours with silence on the other end. I found strange notes slipped under the door, anonymous threats masked as warnings. The neighbors who had once been friendly now looked at me with suspicion or pity, caught in the crossfire of my feud with Elaine Dodd at first. I wanted to believe these were just petty attempts to intimidate me, but then the threats escalated. One night, the garden gate was vandalized. The roses I'd planted torn apart. The feeling of safety I had fought so hard to reclaim was slipping through my fingers. I called the police and filed reports, but without direct evidence, their hands were tied. It was a helpless feeling, like being trapped in a storm you couldn't outrun. Despite the chaos, I refused to give in. I poured myself into restoring the house, turning it into a home where I could feel peace. The process was grueling, endless repairs, paperwork, and moments of doubt, but every nail hammered was a declaration. I was still here, still fighting. Work became my refuge. I found solace in the rhythm of manual labor, the transformation of decay into beauty. I painted walls in soft blues and creams, planted new flowers to replace the broken ones, and cleaned every corner until it shone. The house slowly started to breathe again, and with it, so did I, but Elaine's shadow was relentless. One evening, as I was leaving the house after a late night organizing documents, I noticed a figure lurking near the driveway. My heart pounded as I locked the door behind me and hurried to my car. The figure disappeared into the dark before I could confront them, but the message was clear. She wasn't done. I shared the incident with my closest friends, who urged me to consider moving, to leave the house behind. But I couldn't. This was my family's legacy, the only place that connected me to my past and my father's memory. I was determined to protect it. To take back control. I installed security cameras and hired a private guard to patrol at night. The presence of protection helped, but it also reminded me daily of the threat lurking just out of sight. During this tense time, I began keeping a journal, chronicling everything, the threats, the repairs, my feelings. Writing became a therapy, a way to process the overwhelming fear and anger. One entry, written after a particularly hard day, read, "They can try to break me, but they don't know what they're up against. This house, these memories, they're my armor. Elaine may have tried to steal my past, but she will never steal my future." As the months passed, the harassment slowly tapered off. Elaine, I suspect, realized that I wasn't going anywhere. But the scars remained, both on the house and in my heart. In the quiet moments, when the house was still and the world outside seemed far away, I would sit by the window and think about everything I had been through. The pain, the betrayal, the fight, they all shaped me in ways I never anticipated. One afternoon, while walking through the garden, I found a single wild rose blooming amidst the thorns. It was imperfect and fragile, yet stubbornly alive. I smiled, seeing in it a reflection of myself, battered but unbroken. The house, my home, was more than wood and brick. It was a testament to resilience, a monument to the strength forged in the fires of betrayal. And no matter what Elaine or anyone else tried, I would protect it and myself with everything I had. The house on Cedar Avenue was no longer just a building. It had become a living, breathing testament to everything I'd endured and overcome. The battles fought within its walls weren't just about ownership. They were about reclaiming identity, dignity, and hope. After months of relentless struggle, quiet harassment, and painstaking restoration, I was finally able to breathe deeply in the place that was always meant to be mine. The day I closed the door behind me for the last time as a tenant, knowing I was finally the rightful owner, still plays vividly in my mind. It was a crisp autumn morning. The golden light poured through the tall windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It felt like stepping into a sanctuary, a place where every scar, every creak of the floorboard held a story, stories of love, loss, betrayal, and resilience. Elaine was no longer a looming threat in my life, but her shadow hadn't completely disappeared. Her betrayal had carved deep wounds, ones that wouldn't fully heal overnight. The weeks after the trial were some of the hardest I'd ever faced. Despite the legal victory, her indirect attempts to unsettle me persisted. Strange phone calls, vague threats from unknown numbers, and the unnerving feeling that someone was always watching. I realized that winning in court wasn't enough. I had to reclaim my peace, my sense of safety, and that meant turning this house into more than just a home. It had to be a fortress of memories and new beginnings. I started by restoring the garden, which had been ravaged by neglect and Elaine's spite. Day after day, I dug, planted, and nurtured the earth beneath my fingers. Wild roses, lavender, and forget-me-nots took root and blossomed. There was something healing in watching life grow from what was once broken. The garden became my refuge, a place where I could feel connected to the past and hopeful for the future. Inside the house, every room told a story. The faded wallpaper in the living room, the squeaky floorboards in the hallway, the window, seat overlooking the garden, each held a piece of my childhood, of my parents' love, and of the painful chapter Elaine had tried to erase. I poured myself into renovations, not just fixing the damage, but restoring the soul of the house. Painted the walls in soft, comforting colors and filled the rooms with furniture that spoke of warmth and welcome. Each brushstroke was an act of defiance against the despair Elaine had left behind, but healing was not linear. Some nights, the silence was deafening. Memories of the betrayal would surge up, and I'd find myself gripping the edge of the kitchen counter, fighting back tears. Yet, in those moments of vulnerability, I found strength, a reminder that I was not defined by pain, but by the courage to face it, head-on, to reclaim my life fully. I knew I needed more than a repaired house. I needed community. Slowly, I began inviting neighbors over, hosting small dinners and gatherings. At first, some were hesitant, unsure about the drama that had unfolded. But as they saw the changes, both in the house and in me, the warmth and acceptance grew, transformed part of the house into a small community center, a place where neighbors could hold book clubs, workshops, and celebrations. It became a hub of connection and joy, a stark contrast to the isolation Elaine had tried to impose. One evening, as I watched children playing in the garden under strings of fairy lights, laughter ringing through the air, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The house was alive again, thriving with memories new and old. Yet closure demanded more than physical restoration. I had to face the emotional aftermath of Elaine's betrayal. Forgiveness was a complicated journey. For a long time, I resented her with a fierce, burning intensity. I wanted her to feel the same pain she had caused me. But over time, I realized that forgiveness wasn't about her. It was about freeing myself from the chains of bitterness and anger. I didn't forget what she did. I didn't excuse it. But I chose to let go of the hatred that was poisoning my spirit. Forgiveness became a gift to myself, a way to reclaim my peace. One afternoon, I wrote a letter to Elaine, not to send, but to release. I poured every hurt, every grievance, and then folded it carefully and set it aflame in the garden fire pit. Watching the flames consume the paper, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was symbolic, but it was powerful. With the past behind I started dreaming again. I enrolled in a course on architecture and home restoration, a way to deepen my connection to the house and turn my experience into a new passion. The house had taught me resilience, and now it was teaching me new skills. Months turned into years. The house on Cedar Avenue was no longer a battleground, but a beacon of hope. I made it my mission to help others protect what was theirs. Families caught in similar fights, people struggling to reclaim their homes and lives. Elaine eventually faded from my life, her presence a distant memory. I heard through the grapevine that she faced legal troubles for other scams, but it no longer mattered to me. My life was no longer defined by her actions. Standing on the porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The journey had been painful, but it had made me who I was, strong, unyielding, and fiercely protective of what mattered. The house was more than wood and nails. It was my legacy, a symbol of survival and the power to rise from betrayal stronger than ever, and that was a story no one could take from me.